water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Avatar Vlogs. This is Season 2, Episode 2, A Cave of Two Lovers. Man, we got a real two theme going on today, don't we? So, before we begin, I'll admit, this was one of those episodes that, as a kid and upon a lot of rewatches, I didn't really like this episode, and if you look up some lists of usually the lesser episodes of Avatar, this is one of the ones that will sometimes appear there. Now, I will say, watching it this time, it is better than I remember it, but it still does have some of its annoyances that really prevent it from being a complete piece and do hold it back a bit. But with that said, here's the plot. So, Team Avatar is continuing their trek to get to the Earth Kingdom, city of Omashu, and they're getting along just fine when they suddenly come across a group of traveling hippies. I think, which is kind of notable because this is, I could be wrong, I believe the first human character that D. Bradley Baker has played in the show, which is, you can tell from this photo, he's about 3 steps away from turning into Matthew Lillard. So if I mentioned before, D. Bradley Baker usually plays a lot of animals on this show, as well as in his voice acting. He's Appa and Momo in this show. And here he plays the hippie Chong. And turns out these hippies are just kind of wandering around. They're not really going or doing anything. But they decide to team up with Team Avatar because the Fire Nation is in pursuit of them. And they figure instead of trying to fly over the mountains with Appa, they're going to take a secret cave, which is known as the Cave of Two Lovers. And so they go into the cave, but they're closed in by the Fire Nation, and it turns out these cave systems are a series of mazes, which were set up by two lovers who created the caves as a way to meet in secrecy when their villages years and years ago were in a state of war and they couldn't see each other. You know, a real Romeo and Juliet type situation, even ending in a beautiful tragedy. We'll get to that. So while they're in the caves, the group gets split up into two. Aang and Katara go one way with Appa, and Sokka and the hippies go the other way. And it's basically these two groups trying to figure out a way to get out of the caves before their torches get out, and they're ultimately trapped in there forever. And of course, like the last episode, we have a parallel plot going on with Zuko and Iroh, which I'll just state right now. One thing I kind of love about this season, which, not really that it's a deep thing, I think it was almost done just as a challenge to the animators, but Zuko's design changes almost each and every single episode. Now, in Season 1, his design was basically the exact same. He had the Fire Nation uniform. He had, he has his, I forget which eye the scar is on. I think it's his left eye. And he's got the high top ponytail. But after he cut off his ponytail along with Iroh in the last episode, signifying his severance from the Fire Nation, his hair is slowly starting to come back. And in this episode, he's got a nice hair-lined buzz cut. And every episode from this point, basically until Season 3, his hair grows a little longer each episode, so it changes. I think that was partly done to keep track of the flow of time, but also I feel it was kind of done as a bit of a trolling challenge to Nickelodeon and the animators by the creators, because we'll get to it another point, but Nickelodeon and the creators famously did not get along, so it's kind of funny how they intentionally make Zuko different every single time, just almost to screw with some people. But anyway, not important. So Zuko and Iroh are now refugees, and they're making their way towards the Earth King. Not even towards the Earth Kingdom, just anywhere they can go, leading to one of the more famous lines in the show where they're debating, if we're captured by the Earth Kingdom, we'll be killed. But if the Fire Nation catches us, they'll turn us over to Azula. Earth Kingdom it is. So they travel on, and things immediately get off to a rough start when Iroh makes tea out of a flower, which he thought was going to turn out to be delicious, but it's basically poison ivy, and it's given him a terrible rash. They get Iroh to a doctor, and Zuko and Iroh join this family for dinner. And this subplot is kind of notable because it's more or less the first time that Zuko is really seeing the effects of the war from the other side. Now, in many respects, that's kind of obvious, you would think, but just remember, he was a prince of the Fire Nation, so he was born and raised, basically, to think the war was a noble cause. He is a prince. He's going to inherit the war come what may. So for him to see, and even though he does know that war is about winning and kind of sacrificing people, I mean, his whole arc, basically, is he got burned because he spoke up against his father because he didn't want to sacrifice young soldiers. But now he is truly seeing the effects of the war. There's a young lady that they come across who not only lost her father to the war, but she herself is scarred on her leg, as Zuko is on his face. And he's not only understanding the other side, but he's kind of he's for the first time starting to realize that he's not alone in the notion of suffering. I know that's, which I kind of like, because let's be honest, a lot of people go through life thinking that only they are the ones with the problems. Only they have bad things happen to them, but that's not the case. Everybody has bad things happen to them, and it's not so much a tough it out, but so much as you have to understand that you're not alone in your suffering. There's people who have had it just as bad or worse, and you can apply that to real life or just to the character. But either way, I only realized that watching this now, and it honestly leads to a great subplot. It also leads to kind of a really kind of sad moment, because even though it's very brief, Zuko and this lady, they kind of bond a little bit over their shared experience. But after Zuko and Iroh leave having supper with them, Zuko steals an ostrich horse. I know what I said. And Iroh kind of chastises him, saying, these people showed you great kindness and you're going to repay them by stealing? And Iroh goes along with it because he doesn't really have a choice. And then you cut to an image of the lady just closing the door as she sort of looks sad, like she's disappointed that he the conversation apparently didn't mean as much to him as it did to her. And it's a brief moment, but it's honestly a very strong moment. I think it was done very, very well. And with that said, everything with the Cave of Two Lovers is not done quite as well. So this episode is better than I remember it, but it does suffer because for kind of two major elements for me. One, I'm probably very alone on this, but I don't really like the hippies in this episode. Now, I will say, maybe it's just Stockholm, maybe I was just beaten down by it, but even though you do start to like them a bit towards the end, I also don't think I've ever identified with Sokka more than I have in this episode, because he has nowhere to turn but to be with these idiots, and he has to guide them through whatever the heck they're going on with, even though they are driving him absolutely crazy. So there's that. The hippies are kind of annoying. I will admit, after a while, D. Bradley Baker's singing did start to warm up on me, but even then I was kind of sitting there just with a lot of annoyance, like, why is this happening? Why are we seeing this? Why does this have to keep going on like this? I find it annoying. I find it very annoying. In fact, I was so happy when the episode ended and Aang asked them, so are you following us to Omashu? And they said, nope. And then just continued on with their day. Very nice. And meanwhile, on the flip side with Aang and Katara, as I've mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of Aang and Katara romantically. And while this episode doesn't get as overt as something like The Fortune Teller, there is a brief scene where Aang and Katara, they find out why the caves existed. It was two lovers from feuding villages who created the cave system as a way to see each other. But after the man was killed in the war, the lady, in a fit of fury, caused the villages to merge together, and they ended up creating the city of Omashu as a dedication to these two. Now, when they enter the caves, there's an inscription that says, love will lead the way in the darkness. And Aang and Katara see that as, oh, they have to kiss. Of course, that's the only logical explanation. Granted, I don't know what I would think in this situation, but, you know. And then, even though it's only like 2 minutes long, they have this really annoying rom-com moment where they kind of joke, like, oh, can you imagine us kissing? And I'm just like, oh, for God's sakes, this is all I was thinking when that was going on. Yeah, it's annoying, and luckily it's brief, but again, it's those moments in these episodes, because these episodes aren't long and they got to cram a ton of story, so every second counts, and when they don't stick the landing, it just sticks out even more how much this does not work. But luckily, it does lead to kind of a nice moment, I guess, where it turns out that when the cave gets dark, there's these crystals that show the proper way through the cave and how to get out. And eventually they get out, they make their way to Omashu, only to find out things aren't exactly how they remember it. Let's see, what is there? I guess the only thing I have left to mention about this is, aside from D. Bradley Baker finally getting a human character to voice, there's 2 guest stars which aren't really, they never appear again, but I thought their names worth mentioning. Lorraine Newman from Saturday Night Live is in this, and she plays the daughter that Zuko has that kind of brief bond with. And even though, again, she has maybe like 3 lines, Barbara Goodson, the voice of Rita from the Power Rangers, is in here as the mother. I was looking at the credits, I said, Barbara Goodson, I know that name. Who is it? Oh, it's Rita. And luckily she doesn't try and do the Rita voice, but it's just something that I was like, huh, okay then. So yeah, with that said, not an episode that's as bad as I remember, but it is an episode that whenever I go back for a rewatch, I kind of got my button on the my thumb on the fast forward button, because, well, not a ton. There are a lot of rather annoying moments. In fact, I think my favorite joke in this whole episode is when Katara sees Sokka again after they get out of the cave, and she says, "Why is your forehead red?" And then the hippie says something stupid, and Sokka's just been face palming the whole time, so it's left like a handprint on his forehead. So that was very funny. But with that said, there's not much else to talk about this episode. It's okay, but it's again kind of a placeholder. It's an episode that had to happen, but I think definitely could have improved. But with that said, I'll see you in the next one, and onwards and upwards, my friends.
The legend says.
Avatar, play your song.
Who's the love because
Was long.
who's the love because it's in your heart.
The journey was long and annoying, but now you get to see what it's really about. The destination. I present to you the Earth Kingdom city of Oh no.